Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles. If you're watching live, it's about 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Here in America, a great week, Thanksgiving week. I am doing something that I haven't done in, I think it's been a couple of months. You've had too much of me solo, and I feel sorry for you. I have a special guest on today, and we're very, very fortunate to have her on. This year, I've been a little more focused on doing more solos. The prior year was almost all interviews. Maybe in 2026, we'll do more of an equal balance. We'll see. Part of it is going to depending on kind of what the audience wants. So on that note, about 2 months ago, I received a white paper from our special guest team. And sometimes I'm too busy and I don't read it, but the timing was right. The title caught my attention. And I read it and I was like, wow, this is good. And this is different than what I normally hear in this aspect of the family and family office world. So I reached out, we connected, I decided to invite her on. And today, kind of a little bit of a 2-for-1. I'll get to that in a second. But the main topic is the core paper that got my attention. Effectively, the hidden architecture of legacy. How visionary legacy creators transform their family relationships into the most powerful force for change. Now, I actually thought of another title I didn't go with, but I'm going to still share it with the audience. When achievement becomes a prison, remembering who you are beyond success. So whatever title you like better, it's going to effectively cover a very interesting topic with our special guest. But our special guest is multi-talented. She wrote another paper, knowing my interest in AI, that she shared with me. And I think we're going to have some disagreement, but that is going to make it intriguing. Or maybe we're more aligned than I even think. And that's going to be her unique perspective on really humans and AI and why we'll forever be unique, per her words, in terms of our humanity. So we do have a lot of deeper, more philosophical type discussions, which I do enjoy. And on that note, welcome everyone, our special guest, Carie Bailey. Carie, how are you?
I'm doing well, Angelo. Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you. And Carie is the founder and president of, do I pronounce it, Verikai?
You too.
All right, I did it right for a
You
change.
did.
My audience is already shocked that I pronounced what could be a slightly complex name properly.
Yes. Did
Why
well.
don't I begin? You write about leaders who achieved what others, sometimes I could argue, only dream of, yet they feel a profound spiritual dissonance.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that?
Mm. This feeling that something is missing. For most of my clients, they've achieved a level of success and accomplishment, and in some cases, fame that they thought would make them happy, and there's this moment for each of them where they get to the point that they thought that everything that they were searching for and working towards, they had arrived at, and they realized that there was still something there that didn't actually make them happy. Something felt missing. And so it's a search for deeper meaning and purpose for a lot of them, and a recognition of identity level discovery of who am I really, why am I here, and how can I use the gifts that I have in my position of influence and my resources to make a big difference in the world.
Is there commonly a moment when people of success like that realize that achievement alone isn't enough?
Of course.
And not to get right into it, and now I'm going to mention a name that's going to be very bifurcating for people. God, I'm such a lovable character. I'm going to mention someone like an Elon Musk,
Mhm.
arguably the world's greatest living entrepreneur.
Yep.
Again, arguably the most successful, if you define it by finances, person on earth. Yet
Mhm.
someone who lives what some would say is a little bit of a non-traditional lifestyle.
Mhm.
Uh, and I've heard him in interviews say that, like, happy, like, no, like, not really. Like, I
Mhm.
almost heard him basically state that he almost looks forward to the day that he's kind of like no longer here, that there's
Mhm.
a burden. How, but he does, I think, so many great inventions and pushing forward
Mm,
in society. You look at someone like that, you probably look at more of a tortured soul. Am I
mm,
wrong? And it's not that Elon, and forget the political perspective, is good or bad, but
mm,
is that someone who has happiness in his life? And how do we define that for him?
mm. Right. And I don't think you can define that for anyone. I think that's for them to define. But I think he has even publicly stated, I saw an interview with him where someone was saying that they wanted to be just like him. And his response was that if you really knew what it was like for him, you wouldn't want that. And, relationally also, I think that he's shared about the loneliness that he feels. And he has multiple failed relationships that I think leaves you always looking for that deeper connection. So Elon Musk is a perfect example of someone that the world looks to as a success, someone to model things after. However, I do see him as kind of a tortured soul, someone who has internal unrest and is still searching for deep meaning, a sense of true identity, and that I think that I think he's definitely using his position of influence and resources for good. I actually believe, though, that he is perfectly ripened for his next evolution, which will actually give him greater access to the insight and creativity and innovation that he seeks, and also the capacity to create lasting relationships of meaning and value and connection.
You used a term called failed relationships. Is
Yeah.
that his words that he's admitting to, or you're putting your paradigm into his world and making that assumption or throwing that force on him, a failed relationship?
I would say it's what he's identified in his relationships that haven't worked. That it seemed like there was great hope in each of them. And then, sadly, they dissolved. So it's the dissolving of those key relationships that are meaningful to us. And I've seen interviews with him where he lamented about the connection with his children, which I think he deeply values it from what he has said. And some of those are fractured relationships.
The term spiritual fragmentation is central to your work and
Mhm.
different than what I normally hear people talk about from a business and psychology language in the world of wealth and the family office community. Can you
Mhm.
walk us through what actually happens? Maybe it's a childhood moment
Mhm.
when we fragment, and why most people never realize that this inherently becomes part of their operating system.
Yes. And this is something that I discovered in my own journey of figuring out what was happening for me because I came from, like Elon, I had a very difficult childhood. And so this was in searching for answers, something that I discovered with myself and then all of my clients. So it's a moment for each of us. It's different. I believe we actually each fragment. And so there's a level, just like we all have cognitive biases, I believe this is a common human experience that we don't recognize. And so it begins in a moment that some of us would identify as traumatic, but for others, it's just seemingly ordinary. But it's a moment of often relational pain that causes us to feel not good enough, or unworthy, or unlovable, or broken in some way. And we then begin to see ourselves from this lens of human judgment. And we look at ourselves as these, with a critical lens rather than understanding who we really are and our inherent worth and value. And then we also begin to see other people through that same lens. And then we learn how to distrust ourselves and other people. It's a moment that we go into an automatic meaning making of, oh, this happened because I must be this. And we begin to build a worldview of that's really operating on the frequency of fear, of lack of safety, lack of trust. And then we have instant coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms that we create in the moment to help us survive. And so actually this ties to what we were talking about. The most successful people in the world often had intense childhood moments that caused them to fragment, and they used it as fuel to create, and to, propel them into a level of success that many don't ever achieve. But there's this underlying fragmentation, which is the searching for something else, because we end up looking externally for validation or identity or purpose or belonging or love, instead of recognizing that all of those are inherently within us.
You talk about helping people reconnect with their divine identity
I do.
as kind of a beloved intelligence
Mhm.
and inherent worth, I guess I would define it as. For listeners, and some I think would be maybe a little bit skeptical
Mhm.
of spiritual language or
Yeah.
come from different faith traditions, how do you help someone access this concept in a way that's perhaps real for them?
Mhm. Well, it is all about never taking on language or something from someone else that doesn't feel true to you. And so a lot of people that I work with have different language that they use to identify it. And what we're talking about from a holistic perspective in what it means to be human, we understand socially, I guess, that we have mind, body, spirit. That's something accepted across multiple cultures. And so, what I'm referring to is this spirit element. And so, whether people call it their spirit, their soul, their true essence, their consciousness, these higher capabilities within us is what I'm referring to. And so, the process of accessing these greater capabilities, which will define how you lead, how you show up in relationships, how you even see and listen to other people in your life, and your capacity to be present in powerful ways and to co create and innovate and access a deeper level of creativity and innovation than otherwise possible.
When I hear the word divine, which is important in
Mhm.
much of your writing, including in
Yeah.
your AI white paper, and
Mhm.
maybe it's on me and not a negative thing, but I think of it from a religious perspective.
Mhm.
Yet you are a little careful in your writing not to really necessarily be specific or necessarily go down those roads or specific what faith is to you.
Mhm.
But are you basically implying from the perspective of it is a religious undertone? And why is that important for you or for others to understand?
Mhm. I believe it's actually a spiritual undertone, and I believe spiritual is different than religious, and can be very different and distinct. And so for me, it is about understanding the true essence of who each of us are. And religion would put a different language on all of it. And so whatever, again, I hear words. I've worked with clients all over the world, and they identify with it in different ways using their language, which is really beautiful. And actually, I love it so much. Every time I find a new word that someone uses to describe this bigger concept. And so for me, it is that this understanding of who we all are at a, again, soul, spirit. I use divine intelligence or divine identity or the divinity inside of us, but you find the language that works for you when we're referring to this inherent identification of who you really are beyond the external measures of success or how other people see you, beyond accomplishment. Who are you really underneath all of that?
I don't know if I'd quite say controversial, but among your
Mhm.
most bold claims that I've
Mhm.
never heard of from the perspective that you put it.
Mhm.
And as someone who's experienced marriage for many years, I believe you're correct. Your
Mm.
comment is you make the bold claim that someone's marriage is the most accurate predictor of their leadership capacity. Why do you say that, knowing that there are some people that may be off put by your comment?
Yeah, I realize that it is the most confronting mirror we have to what's happening within us. And what's happening within us is our capacity to expand with differences or contract, and be defensive. It's our capacity to love when it's difficult, to respond to something that feels like an attack, from a position of overcoming our default reactions and our protective measures to actually stay in the tension and allow ourselves to be expanded and to hear a different view in a way that we find wisdom that we wouldn't have found otherwise. And so those, our role with our children is, I would say, the second most confronting mirror, but the first is the one that we choose because it shows where we are protective. And those protective defense mechanisms are what actually sabotage our capacity to innovate and to co-create and to receive inspiration, and partner inspiration with information and intelligence. And so that's why I believe that our romantic relationship, and I would say marriage, because that's a different level of commitment, our marriage is the most confronting and the most direct access to a remembrance of who we are and accessing greater capabilities.
Do you question the decision making, perseverance, resilience of someone, male or female?
Mm,
That the odds are, just going by the numbers for a first
mhm,
marriage, it's a notch above 50% that it
mhm,
ends in divorce. Does that say something about them, their leadership capability, the society that we live in?
mm. I think what it says is that we have yet to discover what's possible. I don't ever blame someone for a divorce or think less of them because they've gone through that. I actually believe that for all of us, we're in an evolutionary, a perpetual evolutionary state, and we're on our journey to, for me, it feels like a gravitational pull inward to a remembrance of who we really are and what we're capable of. And so for each of us, that journey looks different, and we make decisions and we choose people. Actually, I would say we magnetize people into our lives often who are a mirror to something that's unresolved for us. And it's in that dynamic that we learn and we grow and we come to a resolution of, often painful experiences we had in childhood and who we believed ourselves to be and what we believed we deserved because of that. And we magnetize people who will mirror that. And so we get caught up in repetitive, painful patterns until we learn how to extract the wisdom from it and to evolve from that. And so, you can't ever assume that because someone's divorced that they, haven't expanded or um, weren't on the journey that they needed to be on to evolve and to grow.
But if you say that, yet the most
Mhm.
accurate predictor of their leadership capacity is
Mhm.
effectively their marriage. And I went through, it's not all going to be a bed of roses. There'll
Right.
need to be a level of curiosity, of interest, of
Mhm.
listening, of
Mhm.
leadership, and
Yeah.
of resilience. But you somewhat discount it a little bit with your latter comment, if you don't mind, if you could give some clarity.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Because what I believe is possible is what we have yet to discover. And with that, when we learn how to use our marriage to my husband is my perfect opposite, and we've been married for 24 years, and his chosen career is this elite level special operator. And so we have lived a pressure cooker marriage, and it has brought me to my knees multiple times. It has caused me to turn inward and discover who I am and what I was searching for externally, and what I need to find first within myself, and how to expand with differences, how to be able to co-create with someone who has a completely different view. And so marriage is a pressure cooker, and it ultimately, when we use that to turn inwards and to connect to greater capabilities within us, and we have a certain level of perseverance, and we enter into marriage not from what the other person can do for us, but we enter into it recognizing that we have to fulfill ourselves from within, and we come into a marriage to pour into another individual and to be expanded. And so when we have those capabilities, then to use marriage as this refiner's fire, then marriage definitely will be the predictor of our leadership capacity. What I do find, and often, too often, I would say, in marriage, is that we find where people enter into marriage for what they can get, or I'll be happy with you when you fill, these requirements, or when you fit this box. And so, yeah, you do identify when people, I would say, lack the commitment to allowing the tension in the relationship and the stretching and expanding capacity of it to do just that, to expand you, for you to learn and to grow and to come together through difficult moments and come out of that even stronger together. But that takes both people being willing to go through this. And that's why you can't just predict, the disillusion of a marriage on one person. It's both people need to be able to be willing to do that. But I would say it starts with one. It starts with one person willing to do that to completely transform the relationship. And so those are the people who I believe have the leadership capability and have been prepared for this moment. The people who have, where it's the hardest, if you can do it at home, you can do it anywhere. And where it's the hardest, the people who use that challenge as an opportunity to discover really what is possible and emerge from that with clarity and conviction and commitment and a capacity to hold emotional tension and pressure and be refined by it. I do believe those are the leaders that the world is searching for.
Interesting. We may want to come back to that. I have some
Mhm.
questions that are in my head, but I do want to keep the conversation going.
Okay.
You also talk about the protection and presence pattern. You
Mhm.
describe moments where kind of something else kind of takes over. We often hear, quote unquote, ourselves defending, withdrawing, becoming critical, even as our heart aches to connect. I wasn't
Mhm.
exactly sure what you meant by that. And the context to bringing the conversation back to leadership within the
Mhm.
family, within the
Mhm.
boardroom. If you could expand a little bit, please.
Yeah. So which part of that is, are you wanting me to expand on the way that we look at other people critically and how that applies to leadership in the boardroom?
I mean, I kind of put it as the protection versus the presence pattern. You may
Okay.
have a little different perspective, but I'll
Yeah.
I'll let you answer open-endedly.
Yeah. Okay. And specifically with leadership in the boardroom, again, the same patterns that we have in our family life, we then carry into our leadership. And so if you are listening, we have these default filters that we listen through of I agree, I disagree, you're right or you're wrong, you're credible, you're not, or maybe we're fact checking, or we're gathering evidence from, because this is an automatic pattern that our brain does with these mental heuristics. We have evidence of how they have behaved in the past and we project it onto the current. And so in a leadership position, when or in a boardroom, when you are sitting across from another human being, you are overlaying all of those tendencies and those patterns on the conversation. And so you're not actually present to hear. It's like when you go to a movie or read a book, you don't go in, most of us don't go in with a idea of how it should play out or what's going to happen, or we go in with this allowing the movie or the book to paint the picture. And so, in our leadership and in a boardroom, when we come in with these default patterns, it blocks our capacity to truly hear what another person is saying and to even hear beyond their words to the intention, and to understand that it always goes deeper. It goes from a superficial into a like wisdom from their soul that's beyond what their mental capacities are. And that's kind of that a ladder of what I call emotional intimacy. And so true leadership to me is going way beyond an agenda or transactional relationships into seeing someone else for who they are, understanding the inner wisdom that is within every individual and the capacity that they have to expand you should you choose that. And when you can see them and understand that they have wisdom that you need, and listen, and that they are, a being that, is their inherent worth and value, when you can actually appreciate another human being in that way, then you listen, wanting to be expanded, wanting to truly hear from them, and you listen in a different way. And then the decisions in a board, when you do this for each other and you listen to what is important to this person about this topic and why. And I've taken boardrooms through this process where you go from how you typically listen into listening in a deeper way, and you extract wisdom that you wouldn't otherwise have access to, and it shifts both the dynamic and relationships of the board or of that family unit into one that is co-creative, one that is expansive, one that can adapt and evolve and be dynamic, and one that just inherently values the individual beyond a transactional frame.
In family businesses and family offices, they're often
Mhm.
relatively small initially family units.
Yeah.
It's easy and more arguably effective and
Mhm.
efficient to be
Mhm.
somewhat top down. I grew up a little
Mhm.
bit in that type of environment. Yet
Mhm.
I know long term, as the family expands, the rising generation comes up, that
Mhm.
probably teaches principles that are not going to be conducive to long term family harmony. How
Mhm.
do I maybe transition from top down leadership
Mhm.
where there's an odd number of decision makers and it's less than three to a
Mhm.
little bit more inclusive decision making and it's more bottoms up? Yet again, sometimes that sounds good in theory. I don't
Mhm.
know if that's always worked perfectly in reality.
Mhm. I agree with you. I think that can be difficult. I actually believe it's both. It's the top down and the inclusive nature. And when I say top down, I actually believe that those at the top, so to speak, have the responsibility to master the capacity to seek out different perspectives and to allow themselves to be expanded by that. Because often when we're talking about family offices and families, inherently the founder has a vision and has wisdom and has built what they've built holding this vision, and sometimes the family truly understands the vision and sometimes they only understand aspects of it. And so it's important to be able to extract the wisdom from that vision and to really understand the intent behind the that vision and how it's manifested into the business that it has. And for that business and family, I would say, because they're intertwined, to be able to successfully last for from one generation to the next, the founder needs to have a capacity to listen to the rising generation in a way that they let go of it having to continue to be exactly this, and they allow family members to have a voice, because everyone has a unique contribution. Everyone sees something a little bit differently. And so when you can listen from the space of allowing expansion and encouraging diversity of thought and being present in a way that actually creates and fuels innovation in a deeper way rather than having to protect your vision, when we move from protection to expansion, it shifts a family dynamic into one that can evolve and one that can expand and one that can actually become stronger and fortified for the next generation, because each generation carries with it wisdom from that generation. And so when a family business can adapt and evolve to meet the challenges of our times because of this new fresh perspective and insight, then there's nothing the family can't evolve through.
I like to call this, because in reading what you wrote, kind of the children are watching. You
Mm,
emphasize that children are forming their understanding to some degree of their own worth through
mm,
effectively, no surprise, what they witness. For
mhm.
parents listening who are realizing that they may have been passing down conditional patterns, love patterns, what would
Mhm,
you recommend to them in terms of instilling a sense of empathy, but
mhm,
also strength and leadership?
mhm. Well, we all do this, I would say. All of us are do the best we can with the information that we have. And parenting, so I have 3 children and they're all teenagers, and I would say I learned through trial and error, and I continue to evolve as parents, and I hope that we are all on that evolutionary journey of being better parents, every day, and my children teach me so much, and so I would say, I think parenting is one of the hardest things that we do, and it has the greatest value. It is like where our greatest ROI is. And so our capacity to identify our default reactions and the impact that it has on our children is essential. Because at the end of the day, our legacy isn't just something that we pass on through our wealth and our assets. It's a living and breathing legacy that is transmitted through our interactions with our children. It's their capacity to know who they are, because we can see beyond their behavior, beyond their circumstances, and beyond the history that we have with them, and be present to them in ways that they remember that their inherent worth and value, that there is a purpose for their life, that they have a unique contribution, that they're valued, allowing them to be who they are and being in discovery of that without judgment or trying to have them fit into a box for approval. Because our family is a sacred unit, and it either can be something that's rigid and here's the rules and you have to fit into this to fit into our family and to belong and to be accepted, or it can be something entirely different. It can serve as a catalyst for the evolution of every family member, and something where, as they are discovering who they really are and why they're here and what they're capable of and their unique gifts and interests, it fuels the family, and it actually then spurs innovation. And for me, the family is more important than the business, and the family is what will catapult the business. The family unit, when we focus on that, is not only the thing that on our deathbeds we'll care most about, it is the nucleus for the business and for the longevity of the wealth and the assets and all of that moving forward. And then the impact that we have on our children is what ripples for generations.
In some of the work that I've done with what we define as the rising generation in the family,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up in a unique environment, horrifically poor, broken home,
Mm-hmm.
and from an era where there was defined roles between, for lack of a better word, male and female.
Yeah.
In other words, I think I could relate to some of the things that your husband, given his background and probably his experience, we would probably have some commonalities in terms of our cultural purpose, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
I have some concerns that I'm seeing. I want to choose my words not carefully because I care to, but I want to be more succinct in my question. A little bit of a lack of courage, a little bit of a, like, I want, when my son was younger, to look him in the eye in a positive way every day and say, what did you fail at today?
Yeah.
And not the opposite of to scold, to encourage taking risks, to encourage the fact that you need to go out and seek and be curious, and not everything you do, not every time you shoot a shot is going to go in.
Right.
So how do we encourage our children to have courage, to live in a sense of strength, however we may define that, and to understand that as long as we learn, it's okay to be curious and to fail at things?
Well, I think we model that. We have open conversations about that. And in our family, we create strategic challenges for our family. My husband does a great job at having private experiences with our children where, they'll go on, like, for our boys' man trips. Our daughter, it'll be a daddy-daughter trip where he intentionally brings them into a scenario that will challenge them. And there's a preparation, there's, challenges, and then there's a debriefing of it. And so in our and that isn't just one, but there's like certain ages, that we have very intentional experiences like that with them. And as a family culture, we lean into challenge and transition, and just, I think life has different unique opportunities to, like when you don't make the team, or you realize that you failed at something, or for us, we actually lean into those moments. My son was just writing his college papers, and he was talking about, so my family does jujitsu. And in one of his essays, what he chose to speak on is a moment where he got completely destroyed in a world jiu-jitsu tournament. And he just left the mat feeling completely ashamed and embarrassed and didn't want to look his dad in the eye because he attached his identity to that. And my husband did an incredible job at having him realize that it isn't about whether you get knocked down, but it's about who you know yourself to be and how you get up from that and how you move forward. And so then my son just spent a year really just challenging himself in every way possible and learning and growing, and then went to that same world tournament a year later and won gold. And even in that winning gold,
Wow.
he no longer identified though with like, oh, now I'm a winner. Winning gold didn't have an impact on him as far as his identity. It was knowing who he is and knowing that he can do difficult things and rise with challenges and not let so-called like wins or success or failure to identify and define him. And so that to me is part of kind of our family culture, is again knowing who you are and what you're capable of and seeing everything as a growth opportunity.
Maybe let's give a little bit of a practical example.
Hmm.
Uh, Imagine at the dinner table with spouse and children,
Hmm.
and different perspectives emerge about a significant decision. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's not top down, where one person is effectively solely making the decision.
Hmm.
Although there are times that may
Hmm.
be the better approach, and it's definitely
Hmm.
the easier approach, but that doesn't always necessarily mean it's better. I
Hmm.
am someone, probably strong opinions, but loosely held. I
Hmm.
actually enjoy debates and somewhat
Hmm.
confrontation. I know that's probably more uncommon than
Hmm.
for most people. And
Hmm.
yes, that does sometimes cause issues and problems at my own dinner table. How do you, going back to effectively leadership and success,
Hmm.
because for you, that probably is going to be a correlation at the family to within the business, whether it's a
Hmm.
family business or family office.
Hmm.
So, how do you look at those discussions? Do they turn into yelling and debate? Is
Hmm.
it one person or multiple that's making a decision? Does the
Hmm.
person who simply makes the most money have the most
Hmm.
power?
Hmm. Well, we're actually going through this right now as a family, and this is a common thing for us. I'll just speak to us rather than speaking about my clients' experiences. Um, but it's the same principle. So, number one, I don't believe that money should be used as a power manipulator. Um, because when you really value the insight of every member of the family and are seeking to unify your family and make decisions as a unit, then removing that as a power play, I feel like is the healthiest experience for everyone. And with that said, for like right now, we're looking at, do we want to relocate? Do we want to take on different opportunities? And what does that look like? And so um, I believe first coming together as a husband and wife, when there is a husband and wife, and having open dialogue and open conversations and valuing each other's input as equals. And when you come together, and it doesn't mean that groupthink, it doesn't mean we have to have the same idea. Actually, it's great when you don't, because there's wisdom and a differing view that will expand you and expand your view of the situation and the decision to be made. And so, a lot of people tend to focus on where do we just agree. And I actually think that that's a shame and you're missing out on expansion. And so when you can really have honest and open and transparent conversations and lean into the differences of opinion and see what is the wisdom here that's important for this decision, and extract all of the wisdom and then come together like, this board example. Um, then from a husband and wife being unified together, then bringing the children in and sharing with them as a unified unit, parental unit, the decision to be made where, we feel like we are, different pros and cons with each, and then opening up the discussion for the children to each have a voice. And again, I see this often in transitions in family business. So, it's the same framework, but when you can come together and hear each perspective, there's wisdom in every perspective. And then when you can extract that, because what you're looking for is a shift from one genius into collective wisdom, because I think the complexity of our times necessitate this greater capacity to move from, this is what I think, and I'm in my zone of genius, and so this is what we're going to do, to a capacity to gather collective insight and wisdom and lean into people who have a different opinion and be able to find the wisdom and have the expansion, and then bring that together and make a decision from a unified space, because that's how you bring everyone in alignment and in harmony and unity with
If I may,
whatever it is. Yeah,
if I may push back a little bit,
please.
uh, of course, in what I would define as God's eyes, we're all equal. We're all
Hmm.
incredible. And
Hmm.
there's more skill set than simply IQ and raw intelligence.
Yep.
There's emotional intelligence, the capacity to love.
Hmm.
But in important decisions like you may be talking about,
Hmm.
simply one person may be gifted and has advantages in their IQ.
Yeah.
Henceforth, their inherent capability to process information and make
Hmm.
decisions perhaps means it should not be watered down by others. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be questioned,
Hmm.
that we need to be curious, that we need to take the opposite perspective to maybe bring the best out of them. But
Hmm.
maybe collective wisdom is, I don't know if I'm on board with it. And I know I
Hmm.
sound a little archaic and old fashioned, but there are some
Hmm.
people that are inherently very gifted, and
Hmm.
maybe giving those decisions to them, even inside a family, for the
Hmm.
big picture decisions
Hmm.
helps it be smoother and easier in the process going along.
I understand that. I do. I think the frame of watering down your unique gift of being able to make decisions, um, if it seemed that way, then certainly that would, provide a difficult situation with hearing the perspectives. I don't actually believe that it's watering it down. I believe it's expanding it. And so I'm a quick decision maker. I can listen to, 10 different insight and 10 different opinions and extract wisdom from all of them. And so I myself identify as someone who can assimilate information very rapidly and make decisions, as is my husband. So this is where both of us are very, very gifted at decision making. However, when because we're very comfortable about our capacity to make informed decisions and wise decisions, if we see other people's perspective as watering down our genius, then we close off to insight that we might not have access to otherwise. And even our younger children bring value to that conversation and something for us to consider. And it's part of, I believe, our capacity to unify a family unit, which is also our capacity to unify a board, or, within our sphere of influence, whatever organization that we're leading. And so I believe it's an essential skill set, because you can have the founder with his vision, or his or her vision, who understands that not everyone sees the vision, right? But they represent a piece of that pie, or that, the collective that provides an something to consider, something to expand, if you choose it. And I just believe it's beyond even just the decision that's made in the moment. It's the skill set and the capacity to be expanded instead of feeling like you're being watered down.
Does a family need to decide what is their purpose?
As a family unit,
Yes.
I believe that always starting with why is a great idea. I think for family mission, vision, purpose, the capacity we just talked about is essential. Because unless you're just telling the family this is what we're doing, which actually I've worked with a number of founders who that's their approach, and they prefer that, but then what they struggle with having buy-in. They struggle with other people really feeling like they're part of it, or contributing. And so then the challenge that they have is that the family is in a board, and you have people who don't even participate or contribute in a meaningful way because they know that their opinion isn't going to be sought out or valued. And so you're then kind of leading from the front and hoping everyone else will participate and get on board, rather than unifying towards a shared vision and leading together and activating, because we have to remember that everyone has unique gifts. And so when you can activate people's true source of creativity and innovation and insight and wisdom, that's when you actually, the collective wisdom fuels something that's way better than what one person can create.
You're big in your writing in our conversations, and I kind of promised I would somewhat come back to this
Mhm.
relative to a family. We each may
Mhm.
define that differently.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a bond of, let's go with the word marriage in whatever
Mhm.
form it may be,
Mhm.
and likely quote unquote children.
Mhm.
Yet that has dissipated often in Western countries, actually, about the time that I was born,
Mhm.
1965. Some
Mhm.
would argue that happens to be, I believe, the year of the pill. Some would argue mutual access to education.
Mhm.
In other words, women having greater access to education has historically been correlated with lower rates of marriage. It's
Mhm.
just the math.
Mhm.
How do you look at a world moving forward, a world
Mhm.
changing rapidly? Will transition to AI in probably 5 or 10 more minutes.
Mhm.
But the institution of marriage, of coming together, we
Mhm.
both know a lot of young people now, it seems to be maybe a little more so men are disenfranchised,
Mhm.
challenged.
Mhm.
Uh, I see it in the youth that I speak to in universities and
Mhm.
within families.
Mhm.
So I'm throwing a very open ended question. Some would
Mhm.
say a little politically charged.
Mhm.
But why don't I learn from you and let you run with it? And we'll see where we go from there.
Mhm. Yeah, I see this across the board, actually, between women and men, and some who have come out of divorces and just have had such a negative experience that they don't want to get married again. Um, or, the younger generation who doesn't want to be tied down, so to speak. Mm, However, and there's an interesting thing, especially when we, because that I have a spiritual background and that's something that's important to me. Even in a spiritual context, I've worked with founders who have hired spiritual guides, who will tell them that no, marriage isn't, it's kind of an outdated concept. And actually, you are, you'll achieve a higher level of consciousness if you are open spiritually and you have more than one partner. And, because there's a phrase that they use when they use this argument, and I can't remember it right now. But essentially, it's the path to enlightenment is not through monogamous marriage, essentially. And I have found that that can't be further from the truth. Because what we talked about with the marriage being a confronting mirror, and that commitment that you make to another human being. I mean, when you go to a wedding, there is this palpable experience that you have. It's why a lot of people cry at weddings, because you know that you're in the presence of something sacred, and that's that commitment that you're making to another human being. That through the good and the bad, you were there for each other, and you will figure it out. And marriage is a sacred union. And it is and will always be the deepest portal to your highest level of operational capacity, intelligence, remembrance of who you are, access to higher capabilities. Um, Marriage is something that when we commit to someone in that way, and when we learn how to expand through our differences and co-create together from inspired spaces, nothing like marriage will have you learn and grow and expand, and learn the art of co-creation and all of these things more than anything else. And so, and you can't ever convince me otherwise, because I've worked with people in this specifically with their romantic relationships, and their family relationships, but focused on romantic relationships all over the world in lots of different cultures. And it remains the most pivotal relationship that you can have for your leadership capacity, for your again, discovering who you are and what you're capable of, and then what's possible in family relationships. If you're not, yeah, I feel it's a disservice to not highlight how incredible a marriage can be. And I feel for everyone who has had such like horrible experiences with marriage. And I would just say to you, if you're listening and that's you, the pain that we feel in that when we come out of something like that is the gap between what we know is possible and what we've experienced. And I would just encourage you to discover your capacity to bring that wisdom that you know of what's possible into the world. And I work with people all the time who have come out of really difficult situations and painful divorces, and they have committed to birthing into the world like that understanding of what's possible that's within them. And I think that we all have this vision of what's possible that at some point we decide it's not possible anymore. And that's a shame because it's a gift to the world. And when we model that for our children, I believe it's one of the greatest gifts we can give them.
Bringing a little bit of biology into the discussion, mating, not survival, I could argue is the name of the game. Traditionally, we could argue through religious institutions going back multiple hundreds of years,
Mhm.
the institution of marriage, for a variety of reasons, serves quote unquote many purposes.
Mhm.
For, again, a variety of reasons that we probably don't have the time to get into. But that opportunity, creating unity, creating a family, creating
Mhm.
quote unquote children, and going
Mhm.
back to my biological mating, not even survival is the name of the game. Just
Mhm.
imagine 500, 600 years ago, even sooner, but we'll go with that. No antibiotics.
Mhm.
Uh, Women given childbirth, what was
Mhm.
it? Had maybe a 20 or 30% chance of death.
Mhm.
It still did it.
Mhm.
And that goes back to a little bit of a biological imperative. I don't exactly know what my question is. I'm
Mhm.
broadly agreeing with your last comment and trying to
Mhm.
add a little bit of biology to it. But
Yeah.
maybe I will push back a little bit
Mhm.
from one perspective. You
Mhm.
almost implied, I may be putting words in your mouth,
Mhm.
that it simply is the male decision in terms of committing and moving forward. Honestly, a lot of younger men I talk to feel they don't even have the opportunity to be in a position to get married, let alone
Mhm.
the fact that they may think the legal system's against them and all that. We could save that discussion for a different time.
Mhm.
In other words, it's getting harder and harder for men to stand out. And I
Mhm.
could argue that's very well on them. But in terms of your experiences, if marriage and the unity and mating is more important than survival, populations are declining in most parts of the world.
Mhm.
How do you have any answers to this and family unity, continuity,
Mhm.
and generations continuing in the family when that appears to be somewhat disintegrating?
Mm. Well, and can you reference what did you feel like I implied that men are responsible for?
Well, I think there's more men than you would think that would actually
Mhm.
want to commit and settle down. You look at
Mhm.
most billionaires, they got married relatively young. They had
Yeah.
children relatively young. I
Yeah.
could go on and on. There's a whole list of them. Whether
Mhm.
those marriages lasted may be a different story, but
Mhm.
often in their 20s is when a lot of their focus on a commitment to family and marriage occurred. But
Yeah.
I think it's getting harder and harder for men to feel confident to be in a position to make a long-term commitment to marriage. Honestly, a lot of them can't even get a date, let
Mm.
alone entering into a unity of marriage. Now, we could get down
Mhm.
the road of
Mhm.
smoking weed in the young generation, video games.
Mm.
There's a variety of different factors, the lessening
Mhm.
of testosterone due to a variety of different factors,
Mhm.
making it more and more difficult for especially younger men to find their
Mhm.
purpose and to stand out.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if that's something, rather honestly,
Mhm.
that you're going to be able to relate to. It's something that I would understand from the conversations that I have with a lot
Mhm.
of younger people.
Mhm. Yeah, and actually what's interesting, hearing you say that is I of course hear the other way around. I hear that there's so many women who are having that same struggle. And so I guess universally Um, universally, I guess it's a struggle, right? Um, that's something down the road that I actually am super interested in helping support this, not only the preparation to make your marriage successful and be able to truly last, and what that process looks like, not just planning for the wedding, but preparing for the marriage. Um, and helping people find each other, I guess. I know there's a lot of incredible matchmakers that can help support that process. Um, but
I'm going to disagree with you a little
are
bit.
they not? Yeah,
Men, I'm going to highly recommend, please
yeah.
never use a matchmaker. But pardon my interruption.
No,
Continue.
it's okay. My brother-in-law was just very successful in doing that. He found my sister. So,
Okay, you have one example of where it worked out.
okay. And again, that's not a space that I'm like in yet. So but I think I'll speak more to the role of marriage, because you said something about, it's for mating, and you talked about kind of the traditional reasons for marriage, um, and I would say there's so much more to that, um, because marriage can be a very transactional business type relationship, and that would be very unfortunate because when you have a transactional relationship, it's like having a life without music, or for you, maybe a life without football. Like it's something that just is like you're just going through the motions rather than really discovering what's possible. And so transcendent relationships is this capacity to overcome these like default patterns that cause division and disconnection, that really, because we're wired essentially to fail in relationships. Our human system is focused on self-preservation and operates from the frequency of fear. And unless we learn how to override that, which is why we need to remember who we are and discover our higher capabilities, is because it's the only way that we can actually create love that lasts. We can actually expand with differences and be present to people in ways that we see who they really are beyond this like human lens of judgment and criticism. And it's the only way that we can actually access greater capacity to co-create.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Would like to one day come back to deeper discussions on that, but in
Mhm.
continuing and a little bit of a somewhat transition into
Mhm.
consciousness technology, which could bring in
Yep.
AI and
Yep.
divine identity. Boy, we're going to go down
Mhm.
some interesting roads. We probably only
Mhm.
have about 10 or 12 minutes, but let's give it a shot.
Okay.
If we're all divine intelligence fragments, is
Mhm.
reality itself a consciousness experiment? Now, where's the question? That might be a question, but if spiritual fragmentation isn't a
Mhm.
bug, then effectively it's a feature. Why don't I let you run with effectively my open ended commentary slash question, and then we could take it from there?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think that we are spiritual beings, divine intelligences having a human experience, and that we are here to learn and grow. Um, and access our capacity to co-create, and our power to create. So, and for me, it isn't ever just about us. It's about the impact that we have. And so, I speak to like higher purpose, and I think we have all been reserved for this moment in time. Those of us alive now, I think people are placed in history in a very intentional way. And so for us, I believe that we've been reserved for this moment. And, when we talk about family relationships, there are God-given relationships. Our children are only like God-given relationships. And so those to me are sacred. And if you use a different word for God, substitute for you what works there, whether it's consciousness or love or source or universe. But those are, yeah. So to me, it is about remembering who we are and why we're here and what is our greatest impact on humanity, and how does that start at home?
As AI becomes somewhat of our mirror, will it accelerate humanity's spiritual fragmentation or force us into remembrance?
Well, that's a great question. And I hope it forces us into remembrance because as technology is evolving at a rapid pace, humanity gets to evolve as well. And for me, that evolution is about remembering because our divine, and this is the thing that, I imagine we're going into is what is the human brain capacity versus AI? And clearly, I think that we lose on that front because to your point of, what you said in the segments, it make, AI it's a machine. And so it's void of, the emotion or the bias and things like that. However, our divine intelligence, which each of us have, which is this wisdom beyond our cognition, beyond the human brain and all of the cognitive biases and heuristics that we have, and beyond the programmable nature of our brain, our divine intelligence is a wisdom that will always go beyond human intelligence. And so AI is a great tool to be used, but we have to look at who is the prompt creator, because if the prompt creator is our human level of consciousness, then our projects and output are always going to just be at that level because AI just replicates at the level of frequency you give it. And so if the prompt creator is our divine intelligence and we're accessing that greater wisdom, then again, what you get out of it and what you create from that space is entirely different.
We're going to come back to a little bit of that part of it shortly, but continuing along the spiritual type theme and kind of colliding, I guess you could say, with AI, what happens when billions of people start having, it's already happening lightly, but their most intimate conversations with AI? And this relates a little bit to what I said earlier about the fragmentation of younger people,
Yeah.
male and female, and frustrations, and the fact that they're finding listening from quote unquote a machine, and it's getting better and smarter and likely tugging upon their emotions.
Yes, 100%. So I actually have spoken at different private AI events with those who are creating technologies that they believe will revolutionize every industry. And I have met robots designed to be caregivers, for the elderly. I have also seen demonstrations of AI girlfriends and boyfriends. And it's really, to me, it's and I've been approached to train these robots in how to really listen and connect, which of course I just haven't done yet because I want humans to have a greater capability than, an artificial instrument. And I believe that, especially when we're talking about the rising generation, as parents, we have an obligation and a responsibility to know how to be present to our children in a way that they feel deeply seen. They have a safe place to go to, because again, this is where our default patterns get in the way. We inherently want to solve problems. We want to give our kids advice. We want to tell them what to do. Or we want to kind of, and when I say we want to, it's our default response. I tend to think that we actually don't want to do these things and it's just automatic. But our default responses often are what sabotage our relationships. And I do a ton of work with the youth, and I have for decades. And early on, when I was a marriage and family therapist, I worked with a lot of suicidal teens and families who were grieving after their child committed suicide. And I believe that the rising generation is searching for someone who can see them, someone who is a safe place, who can listen to them and who can be a light in their world. And as parents, frankly, we too often can be distracted or respond in ways that don't feel safe enough for them, that they don't even see us as a resource. And so, and I help mentor a lot of youth who are in leadership positions amongst their peers, and I think the thing that I hear more from them is that they do turn they've come up with a reason why they don't have someone in their life is an adult figure who can listen to them and see them. And so they go to YouTube or, AI now for advice on these deeply personal things that we would very much want to be in that conversation with them. And I think the onus is on us adults to develop this capacity to be there for our children in that way.
Well, relating back to the question that I asked, kind of creating digital beings that will help humanity remember or
Mhm.
forget even more deeply, we
Yeah.
shall see.
Yeah.
Uh, if trauma, if trauma passes through genetics, is
Mhm.
your divine identity also encoded in your DNA? And can future generations, to some degree, access your remembrance?
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, epigenetics is definitely showing us that so much has passed through our DNA, including generational challenges. I actually love quantum physics as well. And, Richard Rudd has done an incredible job at looking at human design and gene keys, which is, because our DNA, 90% of it is not what we look like. Only 10% is what we look like. And, the external features, this 90% that biologists would identify as junk DNA, quantum physics has discovered that is actually a map to a spiritual identity, who we really are, what our unique gifts are, and even some challenges like themes of challenges that we'll move through for our evolution, for our discovery of our greater capacities. And so there's a lot still to be discovered about. And I think that this is just an ongoing search of who are we really and what are we capable of. And so, yes, in our again, there is the human being. The human is the stuff that, gets buried when we die. And this being is this other element that I believe that we can either spend our life focused on improving the human, but it's surface level. Or we can spend our life focused on discovering this being that already is. And it collapses time. And it is the source of what will shift the trajectory of our life and the capacity to influence in inspired ways.
A kind of what if the memorance that you're facilitating really isn't just personal memory per se, it's
Mhm.
you're accessing kind of a field of consciousness that
Mhm.
includes your ancestors' wisdom, going back to some of your early
Mhm.
words, and
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit more profound, your descendants' future.
Mhm.
Uh, Man, we could probably do a whole show effectively based around that. I
Yeah.
have one or two more remaining questions. And
Mhm.
for those more traditionally in the family office community, Angelo, where's the conversation on governance and mission statements and vision statements and
Mhm.
constitutions, all
Mhm.
valuable topics
Mhm.
that are somewhat, I mean, honestly, they're somewhat boilerplate. I
Mhm.
could listen to a family. I could work with my AI programs and
Mhm.
develop incredible mission statements, vision statements, constitutions that many of you are not going to listen and follow anyway.
Yeah.
They lack a little bit of often a sense of purpose, communication, engagement by the rising generation. And I'm just tired of the traditional industry and the so-called softer issues of governance only talking about those items, which are relatively easy.
Mhm.
The implementation is sometimes difficult.
Mhm.
Most so the conversation that we're having today is a unique, more deeper type of discussion around the
Mhm.
topics that some of you are a little stuck in a framework of tell me how to do a mission statement.
Mhm.
Like, sure, like I got programs that will come up upon that. Hopefully
Mhm.
not too many. It's kind of boring. But they're out there. They're a part of some of my masterclass programs. But
Mhm.
this is the kind of deeper discussion that apparently the industry is either too afraid to have or doesn't have the intellectual rigor to want to have discussions around something that are more complex and they feel they don't have a black and white answer to, like they creating documents in. Sorry, Carie, I'm such a beloved person in the industry. Now you probably know why. Uh, I'm going to ask you a question that you might even slightly find, I don't know if offensive is the right word, but I'm going
Mhm.
to ask it.
Go ahead.
Do you think that we're living in a simulation?
A simulation meaning?
I would like to leave it open, but if you were to
Okay.
press me a little bit on it,
Yeah.
it basically means that there's a billion different realities, and that maybe there's some 3-year-old who ages a billion years in every 1 year, and they created a simulation in such an advanced society that poof, here we are. And it's kind
Mhm.
of splintering out on its own. You're getting smarter and smarter people, from
Mhm.
Musk to many others, that are
Mhm.
saying, maybe we are living in a simulation. Now, some people from a very spiritual or religious perspective may find
Mhm.
that a little off putting, but
Mhm.
not necessarily. You can make the argument that they
Mhm.
can be somewhat intertwined. Now, I
Mhm.
gave way too much context to that. I should have left it more open ended for you just to make your own assumptions, but there
Yeah.
you are. I'll throw it at you.
Well, I mean, hmm, I believe that we are living in an experience that is definitely, I think we each have our unique experience that feels like, I'm visioning like these little VRs. I think we create our reality through how we see the world. And so, from that perspective, I mean, I guess you could say that that's like a simulation as far as we will each shift our version of reality based on, again, our programmable lenses. And so you can have 5 people go through the same experience and talk to them about it, and everyone has a unique angle to, like, what actually that was, and a different reality to that. It's their perceived reality. And so I think that we're living in a world where perceived reality, is unique to the individual. However, I believe that this life is not just a video game, right? Not just a simulation when people are looking at it from that context. I believe that it's a testing ground. It's a moment in time that is our one shot to be on this earth in these bodies, to see what we're going to do with it, to see if we will focus on just ourselves and our own fulfillment and do whatever we want, or to see if we will use this as an opportunity to really remember who we are, discover higher purpose, seek to create meaningful impact. And so, as we look at especially wealth stewards, you can have families who just focus on accumulation and protecting that, or you can have families who focus on using that as a vehicle to have an incredible impact in the world. And so, I think we get to each choose what that is. But I believe that there's an eternal consequences to how we live our life.
And I noted you did write another white paper that I reviewed, and some
Mhm.
of my last 2 or 3 questions kind of butted up against
Mhm.
it. We'll need to have you on in 2026 to cover, although I will make one comment and ask one question.
Mhm.
You wrote effectively what AI can never replicate.
Mhm.
I enjoyed it. I hear what you're saying. I'm concerned with your word never.
Which one?
Right, the
What?
word never in what
Yeah.
AI can never
Okay.
replicate.
Okay.
So, from my perspective, we're looking
Mhm.
at AI now, especially with Gemini 3, probably
Mhm.
having an IQ, which is a limited form
Mhm.
of understanding intelligence, but it absolutely is applicable and does
Mhm.
matter. Honestly, most billionaires have a
Mhm.
simply higher IQ than most
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
They're able to
Yeah.
juggle different ideas, strategize, and think through problems better than most people on a
Mhm.
strictly intellectual basis. That's just
Mhm.
how it is.
Mhm.
What happens now when arguably the IQ of, say, a Gemini 3 is in the 140s, which by the way
Mhm.
is very high.
Mhm.
Einstein was about 160. A moron's 80. That's about a 2.2, 2.4 uh,
Mhm.
leverage or an example of in
Mhm.
terms of off the median. And
Mhm.
what happens when it's doubling every 6 months, debatably? That compounds, and AI's intelligence, as we define it traditionally, which is
Mhm.
again arguably limited in terms
Mhm.
of IQ,
Mhm.
becomes 400, becomes 1,000? How about in the 2030s when debatably it's greater than every living human combined on Earth? It's
Mhm.
going to be thinking of things that we can't even think of now. The way
Mhm.
that arguably I don't know, name an animal, a dog is to
Mhm.
us, or even worse in 10, 20 years, the way that a firefly is to us now. It's
Mhm.
hard to imagine, not that this will not end well, but you can make that argument. We'll save that discussion. But AI is evolving. Already now, it's generating novel proteins, discovering mathematical theorems, creating original forms of art.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to believe in some of the things you're saying, but I just look at reality. Is
Mhm.
it man who creates something that is effectively more intelligent than us?
Mhm.
And how could that end well?
Mhm. Yeah, it depends on if you're looking at human intelligence or divine intelligence, because AI undoubtedly, as it continues to progress, will challenge our human intellectual capacity. However, the thing that it will never do, it will never have a soul, it will never have a spirit, it will never have this other element that is beyond simply information. And that's the capacity that this element of our divine identity and intelligence has a capacity to expand with differences, to relate to other people in deeply emotional ways, and to create true connection, which is what, those AI girlfriends and boyfriends can't ever do. Our human experience, when it allows, like when we expand our capacity to love and to have inspiration, like that inspiration partnered with information is incredible. And I've seen it in my own life. What I can do with just my intellect is one thing. What I can do with an AI assisted, like when I partner my intellect with an AI amplification, like you talk about, exponentially, more incredible. But when you also learn how to receive inspiration, that's the it factor that AI will just and this, I too never use the word never. In this case, AI will never be able to receive inspiration like we can. And that is that capacity to have the inspiration come from within you, from your own inner wisdom, and also to receive it from the creator. That is something a machine will never be able to do, which is why as technology evolves, we also as human beings must evolve to discover this capacity within us.
I hope you're right. I think you're likely wrong. The rise of artificial superintelligence, probably in the 2030s, and how we define consciousness
Mhm.
is something that we could debate in the upcoming years to come.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll end with, and I think pre the conversation, I noted how I think things could split off and get interesting in the coming years, whether that's 10 years, 20
Mhm.
years, I don't know.
Mhm.
But I look at the Amish, and might we have a percentage of our population that maybe not quite as old fashioned as the Amish, maybe we go back to a more 1970s or 80s, that effectively refuse advanced technology and AI and look to live in certain communities that maybe we could argue a little bit more off the beaten path and
Mhm.
rural-esque. And is there anything wrong with that? If anything, I find almost a charm to that. Not to say that that's something I would do or wouldn't do. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But I do think it's going to get interesting. And
Mhm.
I'll give you the final word.
Hmm. Well, I know we're recording this the week of Thanksgiving, and families are gathering together over the holidays. And I actually believe that not only are we globally in a moment that is a pivotal moment, that how we respond to this moment can shift the trajectory for our families and also our enterprises, and I would say humanity. And so the holidays offer a unique opportunity for families to come together, to recreate family relationships, to rediscover what's possible in a way that, the things that you and I are talking about are like big picture, what's happening in the world and our capacity to impact that. And if we bring it back down to it starts at home within the family unit, the holidays, I've already heard from people who are, like, oh, I just got to get through the holidays. And actually it's so sad for me because the holidays offer an opportunity for us to recreate family relationships in a way that our families become something that evolves and is dynamic and something that can fuel our lives. And so we're actually wanting to offer that, a master class on how to give your loved ones the gift of pure presence, which is the greatest gift you can give them. Over the holidays, and use the holidays to transform your relationships. And this capacity, Angelo, that we're talking about, with all of your concerns about AI and the evolution of relationships and family enterprises, I believe that what we can discover in our family relationships will redefine what's possible in our leadership and what we can create amplified by AI.
And Carie, for those that would have an interest in learning more about your work or possibly
Mhm.
receiving some of the white papers that I referenced, how could they learn more?
So my website is veracailegacy.com. I would say look me up on LinkedIn, and then Angelo, I'll give you access to a private invitation that you can put in your show notes for your audience.
I actually already did. So those of you that are watching in
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, in Facebook, in X, or in one of my YouTube platforms, you should notice a link to actually, speaking of a masterclass that Carie is offering, and feel free to click on it, utilize it. Again, our guest today was Carie, spelled Carie, last name Bailey, Bailey, founder of a company that I did pronounce correctly called Veracai. But how is that spelled? Verakai. So I do encourage you to follow her on LinkedIn, to inquire that you heard her on my program. Her white papers are awesome, I promise. I do recommend, if possible, signing up to her masterclass. Perhaps a different conversation than you expected, but if you wanted the same old family governance and mission statement conversation, you did come to the wrong place. And I'll admit, I'm a little bit outside my bailiwick of geopolitics, macroeconomics, investing in AI, and really anything family office structuring perspective. Those are going to be my anchors and my strength. This is absolutely a part of it and not my strongest point, but I'm curious. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of a different type of dialogue. I hope you enjoyed it. And everyone, thank you very much for being a part of today live. Some interesting comments today, by the way. Apparently you're very popular, Carie, and I'm like an ugly monster. But hey, I will accept the monster moniker. The Darth Vader of the family office world still lives. But remember, in the end, he did end up having a good heart, even though he did make some drastic mistakes. Well, thank you all, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, angelorobles.com, the founder of SFO Continuity and Private Intelligence Strategy and Membership for Family Offices. Thank you. Natasha and some others had some very kind comments. And boy, the hour and 22 minutes kind of breezed by. And I got about 5 pages of show notes that I wasn't able to get to. Someone's going to comment because, Angelo, you asked the most long-winded questions in the world. And you're correct, everyone. I do have to get better at that. Carie, you were a great guest. Look forward to keeping our conversations going. And definitely, if you don't hear from me by late first quarter, reach out and we could do a part 2 and a deeper dive into the AI aspect of it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Angela.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.